Occasionally we may need to prune an attitude or behaviour that is growing. The way in which we enforce these boundaries and attempt to prune is really important. Proverbs says this: train up your child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Our job as parents is not to control our kids. I think sometimes, like it's stressful, you've got lots going on, you've got your 4 kids out there running around, and you're barking out orders, or you're irritated because you haven't slept well, because your kids keep waking up, whatever the situation is for you. Often it's out of irritation, or like, I need to control you right now, so that I can cope. You need to behave this way so that I can cope. Or we're out in public and I don't want you to do something that embarrasses me. So that the way that you're thinking about it sometimes can be a bit like, I need to control you. Our job is to love our kids, to teach our kids, and to train them so that they grow in the right direction. One day they will be beautiful, loving, godly adults.
Question who came in from someone who left a comment, and they asked, how do you know when you're setting the right boundaries as a parent versus you're just being overprotective?
It's a very good question.
Yeah.
In our terms, how do you know if you're training your kids or trapping your kids?
Wow. I think, again, it's going to go back to motive.
Yeah.
Is your motive love or is your motive fear? Are you trying to...
It's amazing how much we keep circling back to that.
And that's pretty much the Christian life. Yeah. And I think the difference is, are you setting up boundaries or barriers?
That's good.
And
hold on, say that
Yeah,
again.
a boundary or a barrier. A barrier is going to actually, like we talked about last episode about this young man looking for a way to escape. So
Yeah.
he wasn't feeling a boundary. He was feeling a barrier.
Yeah.
He was saying, I feel trapped. And so if your children feel trapped, or if you feel like you need to entrap them, then you're not being motivated by love and you're not training them.
Yeah.
We don't want to trap our kids. We want to train them, which means we're going to be engaged in conversations and engaged with giving them tools. I remember, full disclosure, brand new mom. I think I might have been pregnant with Austin. And I got a hold of a book by this amazing counselor called Norman Wright, not NT Wright. No, not NT Wright, but he probably would have said the same thing. Anyway, he asked this question, like, what is our goal as parents? And I wrote this lofty goal. I thought, I have an A+ on this. And I turned the page and he said, if you said anything less than to raise children who are independent of you and dependent on God, you don't understand what it means to be a parent.
Wow.
So if we're raising children that are going to be dependent on God, we're not going to trap them. We're going to train them.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think knowing your children are going to leave your home one day.
Yep.
It's easy to kind of forget that, or for that not to remain in focus, but they are going to leave your home one day. And what adult are you sending out into the world? Is it someone who you would want to be in business with or be in friendship with? Like, how are they going to interact with the world around them? Have you done what you need to do to train them?
Colossians 3:21, fathers, do not exasperate your children so that they will not lose heart. And the NIV says, fathers, do not bitter your children or they'll be discouraged. We need to guide with love so that we don't crush our child's spirit. However, to balance that, we must also teach our children to be respectful, and we must enforce our rules and consequences so that we're preparing them to flourish in the real world. If they don't think that their behaviour has consequences, they're going to fail out there because people are going to reject them when they behave in a certain way. So we have to teach them that the way you treat others matters and there are consequences. Hebrews 12:10 says, for our earthly fathers disciplined... Oh, is there another video?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I think I grew in it. I didn't have a model. I didn't have something really... I mean, my dad did discipline me. Don't get me wrong, but I just didn't this wasn't talked about very much. And I've watched the way you guys handle it, and I like the way you guys handle it much more. So I'm gonna open up with that, and I'm gonna let you guys speak more into it, because I love the way you take care of your children.
Yeah, well, Dad, I think well, there's a proverb, I think it's 25:7 or 24:6, that open rebuke is better than hidden love. And I think we make the mistake of considering, something other than discipline as love. And when we discipline, it's not love. And the truth is, when you mentioned Hebrews 12, that passage, the author tells us that God disciplines us so we can share in his holiness, to share in his wholeness, to share in what it is to be a son or daughter of God. Good. And I think for me as a parent, talking about like where I've missed it, where I've provoked my kids, where I can feel it, like they're provoked and something's not right, and there's a conviction, is when I'm trying to do in 5 minutes what God does in 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Or what God will do
really
in
good.
5 months. And I feel like I'm trying to force this element into the equation or control my child's development and growth and put it on my timetable and my timeline instead of being sensitive to the Spirit. Because sometimes the Spirit of God will go into children. We see this in seasons, and he wants to draw something out. And it's sometimes painful, and you have to be patient as a parent, but you also have to be steadfast. You have to be committed to that process and not just be like, oh, well, this is difficult, I'm going to avoid it. It's like, no, Spirit of God.
Or I'm going to spank it out.
Or I'm just going to spank it, or I'm going to get really intense. Like, no, you actually need to be sensitive to the Spirit. And I think that's what Paul's getting at in Ephesians.
Is that John Bevere's son? That's John Bevere. That is John Bevere's son. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Sorry, no context those videos. So that's John Bevere and Leslie Bevere, famous preachers. If you don't know them, they're really famous in our church world, and there's their kids who I think are pastors as well. Really inspiring new podcast. I think it's like we can make it if you're interested later. Really inspiring. Hebrews 12, for our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years doing the best they knew how. But God's discipline is always good for us, so that we might share in his holiness. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening, it's painful, but afterwards there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. It's about training. So take a grip with your tight hand, strengthen your knees, mark out a straight path for your feet, so that those who are weak and lame will not fall, but become strong. It's about training our kids so they become strong. It's about teaching them. And so, good discipline takes a lot of effort and investment and time, but it's worth it. It's totally worth it. Hurry up. Discipline is about discipleship. The heart of discipline is discipleship. Not you're irritating me, you need to shut up. It's like, hey, sweetie, like there's a better way to behave. There's a better way to treat people. Let's unpack that. Let's go on this journey. Discipleship. If you think about ministry context, discipleship's about loving, patient guidance, and instruction and how to live well. Discipleship's about modeling. It's about imparting. It's about encouraging, exhorting, and correction. And discipline is actually from discipleship. The heart of discipline is discipleship. So if we can get the heart right, then we'll always come from the right angle, and we'll do a good job. If we can treat our kids in this way, like, man, I'm discipling you right now. So I'm going to teach you how to become a beautiful human being, so that when you're older, you'll be a beautiful adult.
Alright, so follow through. I've been talking with some people before about follow through and how important it is. I think particularly as women, we can find this one really, really hard. So the key to good discipline is warmth and follow through. It's a combination. Warmth, love, and follow through. When we have to follow through, we have to follow through when we make mistakes, and we must follow through when we make promises. Matthew 5 says, simply let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything more comes from the evil one. We've got another quick video to watch.
Sometimes parents really hurt themselves, in the fact that where they really hurt themselves is they say no, and then if they're pushed enough, they end up yielding, which tells the child right there, you don't mean what you say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it breaks trust.
I know as a parent, when I said no, I had to think to myself, I am not going to go back on this. Like, I'm going to follow through. Like, if I warned, you're going to be disciplined or something like that, I knew, because I wanted to tell my children that I was a man of integrity.
Yeah.
They could trust then they can trust me on something else, right? And I think that's so important. So
the other day I came across something called a toddler's property laws. If I like it, it's mine. If it's in my hand, it's mine. If I saw it first, it's mine. If it looks like mine, it's mine. If you're playing with something and you put it down, it automatically becomes mine. If it's broken, it's yours. And time again, we have to train them, don't we, not to act in that way. You know, sometimes if we let them act that way as a 5-year-old, they'll act that way as a 35-year-old. So all the time we're trying to teach them the power of boundaries. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable.
When a child is taught the difference between kind and selfish behaviour, they're learning lessons for life. They learn to take responsibility for their own actions, which in turn enables them to form healthy relationships.
As a teacher, I've taught my students about boundaries and disciplines. For instance, in one football lesson, because they all love football, I've decided to say, okay, and the focus was rules. I took away all the rules and I told them we're going to play for 2 minutes without rules. And, you know, within seconds, one of the kids was hurt, up looking at me, saying, that was a foul. And I repeat, no rules. And they started to clue on, and they, you know, picked up the ball, and they started running. And they ran around the field, and everyone's chasing them. And it got manic. And I sat them down, and I said, right, we're going to play 2 minutes with rules. And then eventually, when I asked them, questioned them and asked them some questions about it, they then realised, actually, it's there to have fun, not just to restrict you from doing what you want. It enables you to be able to play a game and have fun. So that's what I drew out of that lesson, looking at boundaries and discipline, actually.
The combination of loving our children unconditionally and putting in appropriate boundaries for their behaviour is foundational for our children's development and for their journey to maturity.
Love and boundaries together give our children a healthy respect for authority. Authority is an important and necessary part of life. Modelling a respect for authority starts with us in the home.
The way that we respond to authority, of course, will have a very big impact on how our children respond to authority. So, for example, if we undermine the headmistress at our child's school or the teacher by saying silly things about them and disempowering those figures of authority, of course, that's not going to be teaching our children to respect authority.
Children definitely need to respect figures of authority, whether it be their parents, whether it be teachers in school, whether it be a police officer on the street, whether it be a shopkeeper, somebody who needs to be respected. But it is important because I think one of the dangers today is possibly because parents aren't instilling that in their children. A lot of children don't respect teachers, don't respect a level of authority in our society, and then that doesn't enable a child to function well and healthily within that society.
As well as teaching our children to have a respect for authority, we also need to let them know that they must speak out if that authority is being abused in any way.
Many children today are growing up without an understanding that authority is an important and necessary part of life. And that's making it harder for teachers and other authority figures to impose order.
The one thing I'd love parents to do more, actually, is to set boundaries and routines. To have a set routine means that when they come to school, things are a lot easier. I sometimes find as a teacher, I'm like the parent. I'm teaching the boundaries, the routines, when to go to lesson, how to get there on time. And at home, sometimes they're not there. And schools and teachers, we can find that very difficult.
If young children don't have boundaries, then they're going to find the routines and the structure of school life difficult. They particularly will have difficulty listening and participating fully within lessons, because if they are used to having their own agenda, used to getting their own way, if parents are not willing to say no and are allowing children to push and to follow their own instincts, and that's fine from an experiential point of view to an extent. However, in terms of our social responsibility to work with others, and we don't grow up in isolation, we have to grow up within the wider community, those boundaries are absolutely essential.
Really? Then what's under the bed for? What's the mudroom for?
They love each other, right? So why do they always feel like they're not on the same page? The most common issue in any relationship is the communication barrier. Everyone experiences love differently, and it's easy to miss the mark when it comes to showing that you care. In his early years as a marriage counselor, Dr. Gary Chapman noticed that over and over, couples voiced similar complaints regarding their marriage. One spouse would say something like,
I feel like he doesn't love me.
And the other would protest,
I don't know what else to do. I'm doing everything I should be doing.
Recognizing this pattern and remembering the rocky start in his own marriage, Dr. Chapman poured through years of session notes. He asked himself,
when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want?
Surprisingly, their answers fell into 5 different categories, revealing a unique approach for how to effectively love another person. The premise is simple. Different people with different personalities give and receive love in different ways. Dr. Chapman called these ways of expressing and receiving love the 5 love languages.
What makes you really feel loved?
Well, oh gosh,
What makes me feel loved? When he buys me nice things.
Good question. At this point in our life, I think it's nice to have time together that we didn't have before.
And they tell me like, hey, you did really good on that, or I'm proud of you. Like, coming out and actually saying it.
Well, I would say anytime he makes time for us, helping with Esther and just anytime he's there.
when I come home on break and my mom does my laundry.
I folded it.
Did he really? No. Okay.
When she gives me a big hug or a kiss before she runs off to the bus in the morning, I feel loved.
When he washes the dishes without me asking.
Really? That makes you feel loved?
It does.
You better wash some more dishes.
I think I would say hugs.
Any type of hug? Bear hugs?
Any kind of hug.
Cool.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah, me too.
I am. I really mean it.
Seriously, we're here for you, man. We love you.
Gosh, I love my friends.
I really have to buy you things to show you my love.
It doesn't hurt.
The 5 love languages, strengthening millions of relationships, one language at a time.
My daughter, for example, most of the time when she was a little kid, it's flipped a bit in the teenage years, but when she was a little kid, pretty much all we had to do was like shake our finger at her and sort of speak in a non-approving manner, and she would stop. Whereas my son, that was like round 1, Dad. You know, he was much more determined to get his way, more willing to use resistance to get his way. And so we had to use more invasive behavioral techniques. So one of the things we did with him and with her now and then was, you know, if he was being a pain in the neck at the table, we'd put him on the steps. It's like, you can sit there. How long? Till you're civilized. And that's a really good rule, you know, because, well, it should be for 3 minutes. Like, well, maybe it should be for 10. You don't know. You can't figure out what's the optimal amount of time to give your child if you use timeout. And the answer is you don't know. And so our criteria was, as soon as you're willing to be a desirable human being, really, you can get off the steps and we're done. Like, and that's another thing that's so useful about effective disciplinary techniques. You know, maybe your kid's misbehaving at the table, throwing his food on the floor, whatever it might be, or just being ungrateful and miserable, despite the fact that, you know, your wife has cooked him a nice lunch and he should be thankful for it. And you're not happy about it. You put him on the steps and you say, and you can do this with even 2-year-olds, they're capable of figuring this out. You say, and you might have to hold him there to begin with, because if he's a particularly stubborn child, you're going to put him on the steps and let go and he's going to run off. It's like, ha, ha, ha. It's like, no, you're sitting there, even if I have to hold you. And you want to not be angry about that. It's like, he's 2, you can take him. So you're going to sit there until I tell you you can get up. and you're going to look at me when I talk to you, so you know I mean it. But as soon as you decide that you're going to follow the rules, I'm going to forgive you, like instantly, and that's really important with kids. You don't want to hold a grudge. And do you really want to hold a grudge? Like, do you really want to have a grudge? Wouldn't it be better if it was just over? And the thing is if the kid taps himself into compliance and it's over, well, hooray, then you get what you wanted. And you might think, well, you know, who are you to impose your rules on your child? And the answer is, well, I'm his parent. And you might say, well, what gives you that right? And the answer is, well, I took on the responsibility, and so there's rights that go along with that. And second, like, who else is going to do it? So what gives me that right? It's like, it isn't exactly my right, it's my responsibility. Right? It's not like I want to put my child on the steps to gratify myself, unless I'm, you know, there's something seriously wrong. It's not pleasurable in and of itself. It's like I don't want the kid to be a squalling, wretched reprobate that everyone hates. So the thing is if you let your children take advantage of you, if you have an ounce of spine and an ounce of aggression, which you do, especially if you don't admit it, then you will take revenge on your children. You know, so if they have a temper tantrum in a grocery store and embarrass you, which a child who's canny can do quite effectively, you know, because you wouldn't let them have that pack of crayons or a chocolate bar. And then, you know, you tell yourself it's okay, and that you still, you know, that really didn't make you that angry, and it's okay, but you're fuming inside. And then you go home, and half an hour later, maybe the child is doing some interesting little bit of work, maybe artwork or something, or does something good and comes up for a reward. It's like the probability that you're going to reward that child properly under those circumstances is zero. You're going to take the opportunity to take your revenge. And if you don't know that, then you're not much of a parent. And so part of the trick with kids is that if your child is doing something that makes you dislike them, that you have to figure out how to stop them from doing that and teach them how to do it properly. And you have to talk to your wife to make sure that you're not being too much of a monster, you know, and the same with her. But that discipline is partly what enables you to continue to like your child while you love them. And even more than that, you know, parents talk about fostering self-esteem and fostering creativity and all of that in their kids, and I think that's misbegotten. It's shallow for a variety of reasons. First, it's not that easy to foster creativity because it's rare, and self-esteem is a very badly defined concept, and mostly it's been used for harm, not good. What your job is as a parent is to help your child learn from between 2 years old and say 4 years old how to act in the world so that when people encounter them, people smile and are happy they're around. Because then, you know, I've seen kids who behave badly, and everywhere they go, people wear false smiles, and everywhere they go, people are relieved when they leave. And that means you think about that world from the child's perspective. Everyone's lying, and everyone hates them. That's their world. And then if you have your child, you know, capable of adhering to minimal social requirements, like maybe being able to sit at the table in a civilized manner for an hour and being grateful for being fed, let's say, and knowing how to share and knowing how to pay attention to adults, and not having that, you know, that kind of terrible cynicism and arrogance that can develop even in a 4-year-old child who's always had his way, then they'll interact with adults in a manner that bring out the best in the adults. And everywhere they go, everyone smiles at them and pats them on the head, maybe even tells them useful and interesting things. And so the whole world opens up for them. And that's all a consequence of you having enough courage to admit to yourself that your child can do things that you don't like and that you will take it out on them if you don't straighten it out. And people don't like that idea because they think, well, I'd never do anything. You know, I love my child. I'd never do anything to hurt them. It's like, yeah, God, right. You know, you're so asleep if you think that there's almost no hope for you. You have to think, I'm way bigger than this child, and I'm way meaner, and I'm way trickier, and I'm way more unpredictable. And so I better be very careful in my relationships with this child so that the worst of me doesn't come out. And then that gives you enough intelligence to make a disciplinary framework that's minimal and enforce it properly and carefully.
Hello, my name is Dr. Craig Childress. I'm a clinical psychologist in Pasadena, California. And my specialty is in treating ADHD spectrum issues, angry oppositional children, parenting issues, and family relationship problems. And today I'm going to be talking with you about how to parent without anger and yelling and spanking. Now, one of the important things about anger is it can be used in 3 different ways. The first way is sort of an emotional venting, where we feel the feeling and we just sort of explode it all over the room. It feels good to do that, but it's not very useful, and it tends to create just a negative atmosphere, emotional relationship atmosphere all the way around. It's not a particularly useful way to use anger. The second approach to anger is when we direct it more and we target it, and in that case it's used more as a punishment, where we're directly angry at the child for something, and we're inflicting suffering, which is all punishments inflict suffering. And so we're using anger to inflict suffering on our child as a punishment. It's useful in that regard to some degree. It does make kids uncomfortable, but it has a whole lot of negative side effects, particularly around some of the relationship systems. And it tends to foster a psychological loneliness or alienation in children that we have to make sure that we repair and treat after getting angry. The third approach to using anger is a social communication. And that's where we flash it relatively quickly and in small doses, so it's more like annoyance, and we flash a little annoyed face or an angry face, our tone gets a little bit harsher, but it's used within social communication. And what the communication means is that each person has the ability to influence the other. And when we use it as part of the communication system, it's helpful to follow it again with a warm and positive emotional tone to indicate that I'm still in dialogue with you and I still care about you. In terms of physical punishment and spanking, in truth, there's really no need to it. We can get wonderful kids without beating them. I know a lot of families where they have used a lot of physical discipline and result in gang members. I know other families where they have never spanked their kids and wind up with wonderfully responsible and mature children. So spanking isn't necessary for discipline or for to achieve a healthy, emotionally, socially, and psychologically healthy child. In terms of how we use authority, I would recommend alternate punishment strategies if that's what you're going to do. In particular, I would recommend that you learn about how to use guidance-based strategies in which we scaffold the child's mature development, which means we support the child in developing mature behaviors rather than try to punish away the misbehaviors. And I would recommend relationship-based strategies where we have a warm and positive emotional tone, and we enlist the child's cooperation with us rather than simply using discipline and authority-based strategies to try to gain obedience. Thank you very much. If you want to learn more about this, you can visit my website.
Relationship-based strategy. So this is gotcha. The last video we were watching, we talked about relationship-based strategy. And so there's 5 steps to this, and we're just going to go through that together. So number 1 is pause and plan. Actually, we were talking about this just before, the importance of planning and the importance of pausing. Have consequences for common misbehaviors already planned. So that means before the kid does the thing that you know the kid's going to do, have a plan in place. This will save you. This will save you from getting angry. This will save you from getting exasperated, because you know that this is a season. He's going to come through it. She's going to come through it. But also, you've got a plan. You're empowered to be able to hear it out. So when your child does something naughty and you are angry, try and pause for a minute to think through what is the best consequence, what the best consequence should be, so you won't need to backpedal. If you're going to yell out a threat that you know you're not going to do it, like just try your hardest to keep your mouth closed for like 30 seconds, and then I'm sure by that time you'll be able to think of something that's realistic and helpful for the situation, rather than it's the middle of the day, right, you're going to bed. You're like, you know you're not going to go through that one, so just don't say it.
You'll do that.
Right, so we can screw it up. Right, so allowing yourself more time will help you to lash out in anger. Well, okay, sorry, I read it wrong. Allowing yourself time means that you're not going to be lashing out in anger. Obviously, when it's intense, you get angry. That's totally fine. But giving yourself that time to pause, it means that you're not going to be, when you parent in anger, it's going to be done badly. It's going to be done poorly. Like for me, my parents, what they used to do was really effective. They had 9 kids. I mean, it was chaos in our house. But it actually wasn't, because they just did such a good job. So when they were angry, the thing that would happen is go to the step. That was the thing. They would come in, so it's practically time out. They would come in and they'd be calm, and they'd be able to actually have a conversation with you outside, like away from the 8 other kids that are screaming and having fun in the room next door, and actually have a proper connection time with you where you can go, yeah, I'm sorry, Mum, I shouldn't have done that, and know why you're actually in trouble and work through it. So try not to do it in anger. Honestly, your parenting will be so much better if you can just pause for that moment. You may regret smacking your child's bottom. You may regret banning something for a month. So give yourself longer to think it through. The best consequence is relative to the crime, easy to enforce, and also something your child actually cares about.
Yeah, so I realised I used to smack bums occasionally, and I'd make excuses like I just use like 2 fingers, and I was like, but I realised one day when I heard Rachel in the lounge, and she was saying to her little sister, stop, 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 and then I heard, and I was like, because I've been thinking about it for a few months, and I've been feeling uneasy about it. I was like, I'm talking myself into it's fine to smack bums, it's totally normal, but I felt uneasy about it. And every time I smack someone's bum, I feel really bad, and I would apologise and feel like, this is not right. So it was on my mind, and that was the moment for me where I was like, I don't want to smack bums anymore because Rachel's copying me. Like, Rachel's in the other room saying, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. If the little sister's not listening, the last resort is to smack. That's why she just smacked her sister. So I've modelled that to her. And so I need to have a real think about how the heck am I going to do this and come up with some other ideas. Because I don't want to smack bums, but I'm like run out of ideas. So I think that's where the plan, having a plan, like whether you have some rules on the fridge or something, or and as Ariel said, having a seat, or a place where it's like, I've tried this recently and it feels kind of awkward, but it's actually not that bad, where you just say, look, you're in trouble, but I'm going to have to think about what the consequence is going to be. And it's kind of awkward because it's not the immediate consequence, but I think it's okay just to give yourself some time. I'm going to think about this, and there is going to be a consequence. Because it's really hard to think when you're stressed and you're angry with this chaos. So maybe just say, we'll talk about it at this time. At dinner time, we're going to talk about what the consequence is. Just give yourself a bit of space to process what's appropriate, what's effective, and you'll think of something that works. Create focus. So this is really with that sort of relationship-based strategy that psychologists talk about. It's like, and with the authoritative parenting, if you want to read that big study quote in the study on authoritative parenting, but taking the time to focus with your child, taking it out of the chaos.
Sorry, I just had a comment on consequences. What I found is if there isn't an immediately obvious related consequences probably isn't the thing that's going to work in that instance. Needing a tool.
I think it's age appropriate, so I think with younger kids, I find the same thing, like their attention span is, they need to know right now that something's happened. But as they've gotten older, I have found that we can talk about this later, so I think it has more to do with the age, but you're right,
Joy is probably more, Joy's probably more that one, whereas Sarah's, it's just instant, isn't it? Because it's gone in a second day. Don't have it in place. Create focus. If I'm cooking dinner and they all start crying and screaming over there, try my best to actually just push pause, turn the element off, stop what I'm doing, create focus, get on their level, go over, crouch down, hey, what's happening? And give myself the space and time to do it properly. If you're rushing or you're multitasking, it's really hard to do it properly. And yeah, that's what I found, and I found that tip really helpful. Just like stopping what you're doing and yeah, walking over. Multitasking just never works.
Do you find you're doing your food at all?
I turn it off. Yeah, takes a bit longer to cook dinner.
That's the problem though, isn't it? Often it's in the, you know, like that's crazy how we've got crazy right in our homes. When you're cooking and you're trying to organise everything and the kids just go crazy because you're not watching them. And so that's the hardship of trying to get that balance right. So number 3 is listen and feedback. Listen. Have a go at actually listening to your kid without cutting them off. Let them explain what's happening. And you might find that it actually really surprises you. So repeat back to them what they said so that you're showing, you're modelling how to listen well. So one thing that in our marriage that we do is when we're having that tense, you're having a tense conversation, actually trying to pause and go, so what you're saying is, da 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 da, and they can go, yeah, but also this, and they can get to it. It's the same with our kids. When we do that, it's allowing them to go, oh wow, you actually hear what I'm saying. Oh, but I actually also mean this as well, and it invites them into a conversation. Again, this is a similar thing. It is age appropriate. So you've got a 2-year-old, it might not work quite as well as if they're a little bit older, depending on what your child is like.
Establish understanding. Explain to your child why they're in trouble and ask your child to repeat the reason back to you so that you know they actually understand. Ask the child why the behaviour is actually wrong. And discuss until you're confident the child actually understands why this is not okay. Sometimes I will go back, like so I'll put Rachel on timeout or something, and then we'll go visit, sit down and have a conversation. So and I always try and say like, why are you in timeout? Why did I put you in timeout? And sometimes they're like, I don't know, you know? And so trying to have that conversation, I say, oh, you know, any guesses? You know, trying to get to a point where the child in their own words can say and admit why in their view it was wrong, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have taken their toy, they would probably feel really sad about that. And then the last one is discuss restorative options. So through the process of a discussion, when they understand why it was wrong what they did, then actually asking your kid, like, well, what do you think we could do? What do you think you could do to make it better? And actually giving them an opportunity to brainstorm with you some ways to make it better. So for younger ones, it's usually like hit in the face or stole a toy or something, you know. And you know, it's like, oh, I can give the toy back and say sorry. It's like, cool. But obviously for older ones, it's a bit more nuanced and complicated. But this is training your kid. So training them to heal relationships and right wrongs. So when they're not with you, they first of all understand why I shouldn't treat someone like that, why it's wrong, and B, if I do treat someone like that, how I can fix that wrong, how I can make things right. So it's about training them. So we've got a discipline worksheet here that is just a bit of a brainstorm. It might be helpful on the next page. So it says behaviour that needs correction, consequence for breaking the rule, and reward for keeping the rule. So if there's some common stuff that you're seeing a lot at home at the moment, this might be a helpful moment just to have a chat and go, okay, this one's happening all the time. What's a practical thing that we could actually just plan? This is going to be the consequence when this happens.